The man I married called the police on me in our own home. My crime? Writing down the truth about his family. What happened next showed me exactly who I'd been sleeping next to for 3 years, and it wasn't the man I thought I knew. Welcome to Stories by Jason. If you're settled in and ready for a good story, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I've got another exciting story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for the love and support. You're truly appreciated, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I used to believe that love was enough. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in East Oakland where my mother worked double shifts as a nurse and my father fixed cars in our driveway on weekends. We didn't have much, but we had something I wouldn't understand the value of until much later. We had truth. We had the freedom to be ourselves, to speak our minds at the dinner table, to exist without performance or apology. I became a teacher because I wanted to give back to communities like the one that raised me. Every morning, I stood in front of 28 10th graders at Lincoln High and taught them that words had power, that literature could change lives, that their stories mattered. I loved my job. I loved the way Destiny's eyes lit up when she finally understood metaphor. I loved how Marcus stayed after class to argue about symbolism in The Great Gatsby. I loved the messiness and realness and humanity of it all. I never imagined I'd leave that world behind. Julian Whitmore entered my life at a literacy fundraiser in San Francisco. I was there representing Lincoln High, uncomfortable in a borrowed dress, clutching a glass of champagne I didn't want. He was there because his family's foundation was one of the major donors, though I didn't know that yet. What I knew was that he had kind eyes and an easy smile, and when he asked about my work, he actually listened. "You light up when you talk about your students," he said that night, and something in my chest cracked open. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. 8 months of dinners in restaurants where the waiters knew his name, weekends at his family's estate in Sonoma, charity galas where I was always the only black face in the room. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself love was colorblind. I was so wrong. The warning signs were there from the beginning, but I misread them as awkwardness rather than malice. Julian's mother, Catherine Whitmore, with her frozen smile and the way her eyes would travel down my body during every encounter, assessing, judging, finding me lacking. His father, Richard, who spoke to me in the slow, overly enunciated tone people use with children or foreigners. His sister, Vanessa, who never once asked me a direct question but talked around me as if I were furniture. "They just need time to adjust," Julian would say when I brought it up. "They're very traditional. They'll come around." I wanted to believe him, so I smiled through the microaggressions. I laughed at the jokes about where I was really from. I pretended not to notice when Catherine introduced me to other guests as Julian's friend, even after we were engaged. I swallowed my pride and my rage because I thought I was building something bigger than myself, a bridge between worlds, proof that love could transcend difference. Our wedding was a spectacle. 300 guests at the Whitmore estate, a live orchestra, flowers imported from Ecuador. My family occupied 3 tables near the back. Julian's family and friends filled the rest of the venue. My mother cried during the ceremony, and I thought they were tears of joy. Years later, she would tell me they were tears of worry. "I saw how they looked at you, Mija," she said. "Like you were something they owned." The first year of marriage was a slow suffocation I didn't recognize as suffocation. We lived in the Whitmore family's small estate in Pacific Heights, a 5-bedroom house with views of the Golden Gate Bridge that came with a history I couldn't touch. Julian's grandmother's china. Julian's great-grandfather's study. Every room was a museum to a legacy that had no place for me in it. I tried to continue teaching, but the commute from Pacific Heights to East Oakland became impossible. The cultural whiplash gave me headaches. My students would tell me about evictions and police harassment, and I'd go home to a house with security gates and a wine cellar. The dissonance was destroying me. "You don't have to work," Julian said gently one evening, his hand on my shoulder as I graded papers at our kitchen island. "We have more than enough. You could volunteer, pursue your writing, anything you want." What I wanted was to feel useful. What I wanted was to feel like myself. But I quit teaching. And in quitting, I lost the last tether to the person I used to be. The isolation set in gradually. My friends from my old life stopped calling after too many canceled plans, too many conversations cut short because Julian's family needed us at another function. The wealthy wives in Julian's circle included me in their lunch dates and charity committees, but I was always the diversity hire, the fascinating project, never truly one of them. You're so articulate. One of them told me at a garden party, her hand on my arm like we were friends. You're so exotic, another said, touching my hair without permission. I smiled. I always smiled. At family dinners, I was expected to sit quietly while Richard and Julian discussed the Whitmore real estate portfolio, shopping centers in Orange County, apartment complexes in Sacramento, commercial properties scattered throughout California. When I tried to contribute, Catherine would interrupt with questions about my little literacy project or suggest I might want to help in the kitchen. Julian never defended me. He would catch my eye across the table with an apologetic look, but he never spoke up. His silence was a choice, though it took me too long to realize it. The breaking point of my denial came during our second Christmas as a married couple. Catherine hosted an elaborate dinner party at the main estate, 40 guests, all white except for the serving staff and me. I wore a green silk dress Julian had bought me, paired with my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only piece of jewelry I owned that had history and meaning. What an interesting choice, Catherine said when she saw me, her eyes on the pearls. Very ethnic. My grandmother's pearls. Ethnic. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door, staring at my reflection in the gold-framed mirror. Who was I becoming? When had I started shrinking myself to fit into spaces that would never expand to hold me? That night, after all the guests had left and Julian was asleep beside me, I went to his home office on the second floor. I wasn't snooping, or at least I told myself I wasn't. I just needed to understand this world I'd married into, this empire built on real estate and old money and connections that went back generations. I sat at Julian's desk and opened his laptop. I knew his password. He'd never kept it from me. I started reading through files about Whitmore properties, trying to understand the business that had built the fortune that now supported me. What I found changed everything. Hidden in subfolder after subfolder, behind passwords within passwords, were communications that made my blood run cold. Emails from Richard to property managers with coded language about preferred tenant demographics. Spreadsheets tracking rental applications with columns labeled acceptable and review required, with the review required cases consistently being applications from people with black-sounding names or addresses in predominantly black neighborhoods. There were legal memos about how to deny housing without violating fair housing laws. Instructions to managers on acceptable pretexts: already rented, didn't meet income requirements, previous landlord references insufficient. But the applications were from people who met every stated requirement. The only difference was their race. I sat in that leather chair for 3 hours, clicking through file after file, my hands shaking, my stomach churning. This wasn't just passive prejudice or unconscious bias. This was systematic, institutional, calculated racism. This was a family business built on keeping people who looked like me out of safe housing, out of good neighborhoods, out of opportunities for generational wealth. And Julian had access to all of it. The file dates went back 20 years. Julian had been working in the family business for 7 years. There was no way he didn't know. When I finally closed the laptop, the sun was starting to rise over the San Francisco Bay. The view from Julian's office was breathtaking. You could see the water, the bridge, the city spreading out like a promise. But all I could see were the families who had been denied that promise. The children who hadn't gotten to grow up in safe neighborhoods because someone named Whitmore decided their parents weren't preferred tenants. All I could see was my own complicity. I had married into this. I was living off this money. Every meal I ate, every piece of clothing I wore, every comfort I enjoyed was funded by systematic oppression. I felt sick. Julian found me still sitting there an hour later, staring at nothing. "Hey," he said softly, concerned. "Did you sleep here? Are you okay?" I looked at my husband, his tousled hair, his expensive pajamas, his genuine worry. And I realized I didn't know him at all. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And I need you to tell me the truth." Julian's face went carefully blank. In that moment, before he even knew what I was going to ask, his expression shifted into something I'd never seen before, a smooth, corporate neutrality that told me everything I needed to know. "What is it?" he asked, his tone pleasant, professional. "The files on your computer. The rental policies. The systematic rejection of black applicants." I watched his face as I spoke. "Tell me you don't know about it." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Maya," he started. "Tell me," I repeated, my voice breaking now. "Tell me you didn't know." He sat down in the chair across from the desk that had been his grandfather's, that would one day be his. He rubbed his face with both hands. "It's more complicated than it looks," he finally said. Not a denial. An excuse. Complicated. I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. Discrimination is complicated? It's not discrimination, he said, and I heard the defensiveness creeping into his voice. It's risk management. It's business. Maya, you don't understand how real estate works. Don't. I stood up so fast the chair rolled backward. Don't you dare patronize me right now. I'm not stupid, Julian. I know exactly what those files show. Your family has been systematically denying housing to Black families for decades. That's not. We follow all applicable laws. You follow the letter of the law while violating its spirit. My voice rose. I didn't care if I woke anyone. You've found every loophole, every excuse, every way to keep people like me out of your properties. And you knew. You've known for years, and you said nothing. Julian stood too, and now I saw something else in his face. Not guilt, but irritation. As if I was the one being unreasonable. What did you want me to do? He asked. It's my father's company. It's family legacy. These decisions were made long before I. But you benefit from them. We benefit from them. I gestured around the office, at the house, at everything. This life we're living is built on keeping people in poverty. My people, Julian. People who look like me, who grew up like I did. How can you live with that? You're being dramatic, he said, and something in me snapped. I'm being dramatic? Julian, your family has stolen opportunities from thousands of families. They've perpetuated generational poverty. They've built a successful business, he interrupted, his voice sharp now. They've created jobs. They've developed properties. Yes, maybe some of the old policies were dated. But that's not what the business is about. It's about property management, investment, growth. On the backs of people you don't think deserve the same opportunities you had. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I was shaking now, tears streaming down my face. I married you. I trusted you. I thought you were different from them.
But you're not, are you?
You're exactly like them. You just hide it better. Julian's jaw tightened. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. When you calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. I moved toward the door. I can't even look at you right now. Maya, wait. But I was already gone, my heart pounding, my mind reeling. I went to the guest room on the 3rd floor and locked the door behind me. Then I sat on the bed and cried until I had nothing left. The next few weeks were a cold war. Julian tried to apologize, but his apologies were hollow, focused more on my overreaction than on the actual harm his family had caused. He offered to show me the legitimate business reasons for the policies. He suggested I was seeing things through an emotional lens. He never once said what his family had done was wrong. I stopped sleeping in our bedroom. I stopped attending family dinners. I moved through the house like a ghost, haunted by the knowledge of where I was and what had paid for it. And I started writing. At first, it was just for me, a way to process the betrayal, the rage, the grief of losing the person I thought I'd married. I wrote about our courtship, about the warning signs I'd ignored. I wrote about the microaggressions and the isolation. I wrote about the files I'd found and what they meant. But as I wrote, something shifted. This wasn't just my story. This was the story of every person of color who tried to build a life in spaces designed to exclude them. This was the story of systematic oppression wearing the mask of civility. This was the story of how wealth protects itself by silencing those who threaten to expose it. This was bigger than my marriage. This was a truth that needed to be told. I spent 3 months writing in secret, mostly at night when Julian was asleep. I documented everything. The coded language in the emails, the patterns in the rejection data, the legal strategies for discrimination disguised as legitimate business practice. I wove it together with my personal story, showing how the personal and the institutional were inseparable, how the same family that discriminated against strangers had dehumanized me in my own home. I titled it The Whitmore Protocol, a memoir of marriage, money, and manufactured exclusion. When I finally told Julian I was writing a book, his face went white. What kind of book? He asked carefully. A memoir. About our marriage. About your family's business practices. About what I've learned. Maya, you can't. I can. I am. Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand the implications? This could destroy my family's reputation. It could impact the business. There are shareholders, employees, people who depend on profits made from discrimination? His expression hardened. You signed a prenup. That prenup includes confidentiality clauses. If you publish anything that damages the Whitmore family or business, you'll be in breach of contract. We'll sue you for everything. I stared at my husband, this man I'd once loved, who was now threatening me with legal action for telling the truth. Then sue me, I said quietly. I don't care about your money. I never did. That was the moment our marriage truly ended. Not with love lost, but with battle lines drawn. Julian called his father. Richard called the family attorney. Within 48 hours, I received a cease and desist letter demanding I turn over all materials related to the book and agree never to publish anything about the Whitmore family or their business interests. I refused. The attorneys sent another letter, more aggressive this time. They threatened a lawsuit for breach of contract, defamation, theft of trade secrets. They suggested I was mentally unstable, that my erratic behavior during the marriage was well documented, that no one would believe me anyway. I kept writing. I also started making copies. I backed up every file I'd found on Julian's computer. I recorded conversations. I kept every threatening letter, every email, every text message where Julian or his family tried to intimidate me into silence. If they wanted a war, I would give them documentation. But I underestimated how far they were willing to go. It was a Tuesday evening in late March when everything came to a head. I was in what used to be our bedroom, packing my belongings into suitcases. I'd found a small apartment in Oakland, near where I used to teach. I'd contacted a literary agent who was interested in the manuscript. I was planning to leave within the week. Julian came home early from work and found me packing. "What are you doing?" he asked from the doorway. "What does it look like?" "I'm leaving." "You can't leave.
We need to talk about this.
We need to find a solution." "There is no solution, Julian. You chose your family's money over doing what's right. You chose silence over justice. There's nothing left to talk about." He stepped into the room, and I noticed something different about him, a tension in his shoulders, a hardness in his eyes I'd never seen before. "You're not taking that manuscript with you," he said. "Yes, I am. Maya." His voice was controlled, but there was something dangerous underneath. "I'm asking you nicely. Don't publish that book. Don't destroy my family. Your family destroyed themselves. I'm just telling people about it. No one will believe you. You think anyone cares about a disgruntled ex-wife with an axe to grind? You think your word means anything against the Whitmore name? My word is the truth. Your truth is libel. And we will destroy you in court. We will take everything. We will make sure you never work again, never publish again. We have the best lawyers in the state. You have nothing." I zipped up the suitcase and lifted it off the bed. "I have my voice. That's enough." I tried to walk past him, but he moved to block the doorway. "Move, Julian. Not until you give me the manuscript. I'm not giving you anything. Move." We stood there, 2 feet apart, and I realized with growing fear that I didn't know what he would do. This man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years was now a stranger, wearing a familiar face. "I don't want to make this ugly," he said softly, "but I will do whatever it takes to protect my family." "Your family is guilty, Julian. They've committed crimes. They've hurt people. That manuscript has evidence. Evidence you obtained illegally by accessing my private computer. You gave me your password. Under false pretenses. You violated attorney-client privilege by reading confidential legal documents. You stole proprietary business information. Maya, do you understand? You're the one who's broken the law here, not us." The gaslighting was breathtaking. He was rewriting reality right in front of me, turning victim into perpetrator, truth into crime. "Get out of my way," I said, my voice shaking. "Give me the manuscript."
No.
What happened next occurred in slow motion. Julian reached for my bag, the one with my laptop, the one with all my backups. I pulled away. He grabbed my wrist. I jerked back, and the laptop fell to the floor with a sickening crack. "Look what you did," Julian shouted. "You grabbed me. I barely touched you. You're being hysterical." And then I understood. He was creating a narrative. Every word he was saying, every action he was taking, was calculated to paint me as the aggressor, the unstable one, the threat. I ran. I grabbed the suitcase and bolted from the room, down the stairs, toward the front door. But Julian was faster. He got ahead of me, blocking the entrance. "Maya, stop. Just stop and think about what you're doing. I'm leaving. You can't keep me here. I'm not keeping you anywhere. I'm trying to have a conversation." By physically blocking me from leaving? That's not a conversation, Julian. That's imprisonment. You're being ridiculous. I'm not imprisoning you. I'm trying to save our marriage. Our marriage is over. Because you're making it over. Because you're choosing to betray us. I'm betraying you? Your family has betrayed thousands of people. They've built their wealth on discrimination, and you're complicit in all of it. Julian's face flushed red. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his features. Was it shame? Guilt? But then it hardened into something else entirely. Fine, he said, his voice cold. If you want to play this game, we'll play. But I promise you, Maya, you will lose. You will lose everything. He pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Making sure you don't do something we'll both regret. And then I heard it. The 3 numbers that would change everything. 911. What's your emergency? Time stopped. Julian was calling the police.
On me.
In our home. Yes, I need help. Julian said into the phone, his voice calm, measured, the perfect tone of concerned reasonableness. My wife is having some kind of episode. She's acting erratically. She destroyed property. I'm concerned for her safety and mine. I didn't destroy. Julian, what are you doing? Tell them the truth. She's very agitated right now, he continued, turning slightly away from me. I think she might be having a mental health crisis. I don't know if she's taken anything, but she's not acting like herself. The lies poured out of him smoothly, each one carefully crafted to paint a picture of a concerned husband and a dangerous, unstable wife. Yes, we're at 2847 Broadway Street, Pacific Heights. Please hurry. He ended the call and looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been satisfaction. I couldn't tell anymore. They'll be here in a few minutes, he said. I suggest you calm down before they arrive. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing through possibilities. I was a black woman in a wealthy, white neighborhood. The police were coming because my white husband had called them, claiming I was dangerous and erratic. I had a suitcase in my hand like I was fleeing. My laptop was upstairs, cracked on the floor where we'd struggled over it. They would believe him. They always believed men like him. Julian, I whispered, I could die. Do you understand that? Black women die in police encounters. You just weaponized the police against your own wife. For a second, just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Recognition? Regret? But then it was gone, replaced by that smooth corporate neutrality. Just cooperate with them and everything will be fine, he said. Tell them you're okay. Promise you won't publish the book. We can fix this. Even now, he thought he could control the narrative. Even now, he thought this was about the book, about the family reputation, about business. He didn't understand that he'd just shown me exactly who he was. And I would never forget it. The sirens came closer. Julian went to the front door, opened it, stepped out onto the porch with his hands visible, the perfect picture of a cooperative citizen seeking help. I stayed in the foyer, my hands shaking, my heart pounding against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment that would either break me or free me. 2 police officers came up the walk, 1 white male, 1 black female. The female officer's eyes met mine through the doorway, and I saw recognition there. Not of me specifically, but of the situation. She'd seen this before. Sir, you called about a domestic disturbance? The male officer asked Julian. Yes, officer. My wife, she's been under a lot of stress lately. Tonight she became very agitated, destroyed some property, and when I tried to calm her down, she became threatening. I'm worried about her mental state. The words were so smooth, so believable. If I didn't know better, I would believe them myself. Ma'am, can you step outside, please? The male officer called to me. I walked out slowly, carefully, my hands visible, my movements deliberate. I knew the statistics. I knew how this could end. Are you all right, ma'am? The female officer asked, her voice gentle. She positioned herself between me and her partner, between me and Julian. I'm fine. I'm just trying to leave. Has anyone been hurt tonight?
No.
I dropped my laptop during an argument, but no one has been hurt. Sir, you said property was destroyed? The male officer asked Julian. Yes, the laptop. And she's trying to take confidential business documents. That's not true, I interrupted. I'm taking my own personal belongings. My manuscript. My own writing. She's taking proprietary. Julian started. Sir, this sounds like a civil matter, the female officer said firmly. Is anyone in immediate danger here? Julian hesitated. This was the moment. If he said yes, they would arrest me. If he said no, he would lose control of the narrative. I just want to make sure she's safe, he finally said. She's not thinking clearly. The female officer looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw understanding in her eyes. Ma'am, do you want to leave? She asked quietly.
Yes.
I have an apartment ready. I just want to take my things and go. She nodded. Then she turned to her partner. Collins, why don't you stay out here with Mr. Whitmore? I'll help ma'am gather her belongings. It was a gift, a lifeline, a chance. The officer followed me into the house. Once we were out of earshot, she spoke quickly, quietly. Listen to me carefully. Take only what you absolutely need right now. I'll give you 10 minutes. Then you leave and you don't come back, understand? Not without another officer present. Thank you, I whispered. I've seen this before, she said. Rich, white husband, black wife. He calls us to scare her, to control her. You're lucky tonight. My partner out there? He would have arrested you first and asked questions later. I'm giving you a chance. Take it. I took it. I grabbed my laptop, cracked screen and all. I grabbed my external hard drives with all my backups. I grabbed the suitcase I'd already packed and one more bag of essentials. The officer watched the door the entire time. That's enough, she said. Let's go. We walked out together. Julian stood on the porch with the other officer, his face carefully composed. Ma'am, we're advising you to find somewhere else to stay tonight, the female officer said loudly, for everyone's benefit. Sir, if you need to file a property damage report, you can do that at the station. This appears to be a domestic dispute that can be handled through civil channels. Julian's jaw clenched. He'd called the police to intimidate me, to stop me, to control me. Instead, they were escorting me safely away from him. Do you want to press charges? The male officer asked him. Another pause. Julian looked at me, at the officers, at the neighbors who were now watching from their windows. No, he said finally. No charges. Because pressing charges would mean paperwork, investigation, questions, documentation, everything he'd been trying to avoid. Then we're done here, the female officer said. She turned to me. Ma'am, do you have somewhere safe to go?
Yes.
Thank you. She walked me to my car, a modest Honda I'd bought with my own money before the marriage. She helped me load my bags into the trunk. Don't come back here alone, she said quietly. Whatever this is about, whatever he's done, it's not worth your life. Get somewhere safe. Get a lawyer. Protect yourself. I will, I promised. She waited while I got into the car, buckled my seatbelt, started the engine. Only when I was pulling away did she walk back to her patrol car. I drove away from the house in Pacific Heights, from the marble foyer and the wine cellar and the views of the Golden Gate Bridge. Away from Julian and his family and their blood money and their carefully maintained lies. I drove toward Oakland, toward my new apartment, toward freedom, and I didn't look back. The apartment in Oakland was small, a one-bedroom on the third floor of a building that had seen better days. The floors creaked. The heating was inconsistent. The view was of another apartment building across an alley. It was perfect. The first night, I sat on the floor of the empty living room with my laptop and all my backup drives spread around me, checking each one, making sure everything had survived the escape. The manuscript was intact. The evidence was intact. My story was safe. I cried until dawn. Not for Julian, not for the marriage, but for the version of myself I'd lost somewhere in those 3 years. The teacher who believed in the power of education. The woman who spoke her mind. The person who knew who she was and didn't apologize for it. But I would find her again. I had to. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. I found a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Chin who specialized in family law and whistleblower protection. When I showed her the evidence I'd compiled, her eyes widened. This is bigger than a divorce, she said. This is a Fair Housing Act violation case. This is a civil rights lawsuit. Maya, do you understand what you have here? I understand that I'm married into a family that's been systematically discriminating against people for decades. And I understand that then we need to move fast. They're going to come at you, with everything they have. She was right. Julian filed for divorce 3 days after I left, citing irreconcilable differences and abandonment. The filing came with a demand for the return of all stolen property and a restraining order request claiming I was a threat to his safety. Patricia shut it down with a filing of my own, a detailed response including the 9/11 recording, which I'd requested through a public records request. The recording told the whole story, Julian's false claims, his calculated attempt to criminalize me for trying to leave. The judge denied the restraining order immediately. But that was just the first volley. The Whitmores launched a full-scale smear campaign. Suddenly, stories appeared on gossip blogs about the unstable teacher who had married for money and was now trying to extort her ex-husband. Anonymous sources claimed I'd had affairs, that I'd stolen from the family, that I'd been fired from my teaching job for inappropriate conduct. Every single claim was a lie. But lies spread faster than truth, especially when backed by money and power. My mother called me, crying. Someone had shown her the articles. Mija, what is happening? These things they're saying. None of it is true, Mama. They're trying to discredit me before I can tell the truth about them. What truth? Maya, what did you find? So I told her. I told her everything about the discrimination, the systematic exclusion, the coded language in the emails, Julian's complicity, the 911 call. When I finished, there was a long silence. Publish it, she said finally, her voice fierce. You publish every word, Mija. You tell them who we are. You tell them we don't stay silent. That conversation gave me courage. My literary agent, a woman named Jennifer Okonkwo, who had emigrated from Nigeria and built her career representing marginalized voices, was ready to go to market. She'd sent the manuscript to 12 publishers, emphasizing both the personal narrative and the documented evidence of housing discrimination. This isn't just a memoir, she told me. This is investigative journalism wrapped in personal testimony. This is the kind of book that changes legislation. 3 publishers made offers in the first week. We went with Lighthouse Press, an independent publisher known for fearless investigative work. The advance was modest by industry standards, but enough to pay my legal fees and rent for a year while the book went through editing and fact-checking. The Whitmore's lawyers sent cease and desist letters to Jennifer, to Lighthouse Press, to me personally. They threatened lawsuits for defamation, breach of contract, theft of trade secrets. Lighthouse's legal team read every letter and responded with the same message. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. The material was obtained legally. The public interest outweighs any confidentiality concerns. Bring it on. They never filed a lawsuit, because filing would mean discovery. Discovery would mean depositions. Depositions would mean putting Richard Whitmore on the stand and asking him to explain those emails, those policies, those decades of systematic discrimination. They couldn't risk it. Instead, they tried to buy me out. Julian called, the first time I'd heard his voice since that night with the police. Maya, he said, his voice carefully neutral. We need to talk. No, we don't. I'm calling to offer you a settlement. $2 million. You sign an NDA, you don't publish the book, and we finalize the divorce quietly. You walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. $2 million. More money than my parents had earned in their entire lives combined. No, I said. Maya, be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You're offering me money to stay silent about crimes your family has committed. That's not reasonable. That's complicity. It's not about, they just want to move forward. Put this behind us. By pretending it never happened? By letting them continue discriminating against people who have no voice, no platform, no way to fight back? Julian, I have evidence. I have a responsibility to make it public. You have a responsibility to think about your future. Do you know what it's like to be blacklisted? Do you think you'll ever work in education again after you publish this? You'll be seen as a troublemaker, someone who betrays confidences. I'll be seen as someone who told the truth. I can live with that. $2 million, Maya. Think about it. I have thought about it. The answer is no. I hung up. That conversation was the last one we had. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I took nothing from the settlement, no alimony, no property division, nothing. I wanted to walk away with clean hands and clear conscience. Julian's lawyers tried to characterize it as evidence that I'd never really been hurt, that I was simply bitter and vindictive. But Patricia framed it differently in our court filings. Ms. Rodriguez wants no part of wealth built on discrimination. She seeks only the freedom to tell her story. The book was published on a Tuesday in September. The Whitmore Protocol, a memoir of marriage, money, and manufactured exclusion, hit bookstores and e-readers across the country. The publisher had organized a careful publicity campaign, but nothing could have prepared us for what happened next. The book went viral. Within 48 hours, it was the #1 bestseller on Amazon. Excerpts were shared across social media. Book clubs made it a selection. News outlets picked up the story, not just the juicy details of my marriage, but the documented evidence of housing discrimination. Civil rights organizations started investigations. Tenants who had been denied housing by Whitmore Properties began coming forward with their own stories. The coded language in the emails I'd exposed became a case study in how modern discrimination operates. 3 weeks after publication, the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing announced a formal investigation into Whitmore Properties. Richard Whitmore gave a press conference, denying everything, claiming the documents had been taken out of context, insisting that his company followed all laws and regulations. But the receipts were in my book. The emails, with dates and names redacted but language intact. The pattern analysis, showing systematic rejection of minority applicants. The legal memos outlining strategies for discrimination, disguised as legitimate business concerns. You can't spin away from documentation. The lawsuit started, not against me, but against Whitmore Properties. Class action suits from denied tenants. Shareholder suits from investors who claimed they'd been deceived about the company's practices. Regulatory actions from state and federal agencies. The Whitmore empire didn't fall, but it cracked. Their stock price dropped. Richard resigned as CEO, though he remained on the board. Julian took a leave of absence from the company, issuing a statement about taking time to reflect on the serious allegations. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted and vindicated and sad all at once. This wasn't about revenge.
It was about accountability.
The book's success brought opportunities one never expected. I was invited to speak at universities, at civil rights conferences, at literary festivals. I spoke about the intersection of personal trauma and systemic oppression. I spoke about the cost of silence and the power of documentation. I spoke about how love doesn't neutralize racism, it just makes the racism more intimate and more painful. I was invited back to Lincoln High as a guest speaker. Standing in front of those students, different faces now, but the same hopeful energy, I felt like I'd come full circle. Your stories matter, I told them. Your experiences matter. And when people try to silence you, when they offer you comfort in exchange for your voice, when they tell you that speaking up will only hurt you, that's when you need to speak up most. Because silence is how systems of oppression maintain themselves. After my talk, Destiny, now a senior preparing for college, came up to me. She'd read the book. Ms. Rodriguez, she said, her eyes shining with tears. Thank you for showing us what courage looks like. That moment meant more to me than any bestseller list, any review, any award. I eventually moved back into teaching, but differently this time. I taught creative writing at a community college, helping adults from marginalized backgrounds find and develop their voices. I taught them that their stories had power, that documentation was protection, that truth told boldly could shift systems. I met someone new, Simone, a civil rights attorney who had been following my case, and reached out after reading the book. We started as friends, became collaborators on a project about housing discrimination, and eventually became something more. She understood the work. She understood the cost of speaking truth. She understood me. We built a life together that was nothing like my life with Julian. We built it on truth, on shared values, on mutual respect. We built it in a small house in Oakland that we bought together, a house with creaky floors and a garden I tended on weekends and walls covered in art from local Black and brown artists. As for Julian, I heard through the grapevine that he eventually remarried, a woman from another wealthy family, someone who fits seamlessly into the world that had rejected me. I didn't feel jealous or hurt. I felt free. The last I heard, Whitmore Properties had settled the class action lawsuit for $30 million. They'd implemented new fair housing policies and oversight mechanisms. Richard Whitmore had quietly retired to one of his estates. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to undo the harm they'd caused over decades. But it was something. It was acknowledgement.
It was consequence.
And it started because one woman refused to stay silent. I still have the pearls my grandmother gave me, the ones Catherine Whitmore called ethnic. I wear them when I give talks, when I teach, when I need to remember where I come from and what matters. Sometimes people ask me if I regret marrying Julian. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain. I regret the time lost. I regret the version of myself I betrayed by staying silent for so long. But I don't regret the journey. Because it led me here, to this work, to this purpose, to this life built on truth rather than compromise. The Whitmore Protocol wasn't just a book. It became a movement. Other women started coming forward with stories about being silenced by wealthy families, by powerful institutions, by systems designed to protect the status quo. Whitmore Protocol became shorthand for the mechanisms of elite silence and control. My inbox was flooded with messages from people I'd never met, telling me how the book had helped them find their voice, had given them language for experiences they'd thought were unique to them, had shown them they weren't alone. That's the thing about truth. Once you speak it, you give other people permission to speak theirs. 5 years after I left Pacific Heights, I sat in my Oakland garden with Simone, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the city. My second book, A Guide to Documentation and Self-Advocacy for Marginalized People Dealing with Institutional Discrimination, was about to be published. I was teaching a full course load. I was consulting with civil rights organizations. I was building something real. Do you ever miss it? Simone asked, reading my mind like she often did. The money, the comfort, the security? I thought about it honestly. The marble floors and the bay views and the life of ease. No, I said. I don't miss the cage, no matter how golden it was. She squeezed my hand. Good answer. We sat there in comfortable silence, and I thought about the night Julian called 911. How terrified I'd been. How certain I was that I might not survive. But I had survived. More than that, I had found my voice. I had told my truth. I had turned my pain into purpose. And I was free. The thing nobody tells you about freedom is that it's not comfortable. It's not easy. It's not safe. Freedom is the absence of the cage, but it's also the absence of the shelter the cage provided. Freedom is waking up every day and choosing yourself, your values, your voice, even when staying silent would be easier. Freedom is knowing that you own no one your silence, not even people you love. Freedom is understanding that proximity to power is not the same as having power, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. I learned all of this the hard way, but I learned it, and now I teach it. My name is Maya Rodriguez. I was married to a billionaire who called the police on me for writing a book about his family's crimes.
This is my story,
and I'm still here to tell it.
What would you have done in Maya's situation? When faced with a choice between comfort and truth, between wealth and voice, between safety and justice, what would you choose? This story reminds us that speaking truth to power isn't easy. It isn't safe, but it's necessary. Maya could have taken that $2 million. She could have signed the NDA, stayed silent, and lived comfortably for the rest of her life. But she chose something more valuable. She chose her integrity. She chose to give voice to the thousands of families who had been systematically denied housing by the Whitmore family. She chose to break the cycle of silence that protects the powerful and silences the vulnerable. If this story made your blood boil, if it made you think about systems of oppression that operate in plain sight, if it reminded you that one person with courage and documentation can make a difference, then I need you to do something right now. Drop a like on this video if you believe in the power of truth over comfort. Your like tells me you want more stories like this, stories that expose injustice and celebrate courage. Comment below with the words, "Truth over silence," if Maya's story resonated with you. Share your own experience if you've ever had to choose between staying silent and speaking up. This community is built on people like you who refuse to accept injustice as normal. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell because every week I bring you stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, standing up to corruption, exposing discrimination, refusing to be silenced. These are the stories the powerful don't want told. But we're telling them anyway. And here's what I need you to understand. This isn't just entertainment. These are real patterns of discrimination, real systems of oppression, real stories that need to be heard. When you share this video, you're not just sharing content, you're amplifying truth. You're breaking the silence that protects people like the Whitmores. Share this video right now. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Post it to your social media. Use the hashtag #TruthOverSilence. Let's make this story impossible to ignore. Because here's the thing, Maya survived. She spoke up. She won. But for every Maya who makes it out and tells her story, there are countless others who are still trapped, still silent, still suffering. Your engagement on this video, your likes, your comments, your shares, they matter. They push this story into the algorithm. They get it in front of more people. They create space for other Mayas to find their voice. So I'm asking you directly, are you part of the community that stands for justice? Are you someone who refuses to look away from uncomfortable truths? Prove it right now. Smash that like button. Drop your comment. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this everywhere. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about people fighting systems, exposing corruption, choosing truth over comfort, then you need to be here for the next video. We've got stories about whistleblowers, stories about everyday heroes standing up to billion-dollar corporations, stories about people who risked everything to do what's right. This channel is more than just viral content. This is a community, a movement, a space where truth matters more than popularity, where justice matters more than comfort, where the voices of the marginalized are amplified instead of silenced. Join us. Like this video right now. Comment, truth over silence. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to hear Maya's story. Because silence is what the powerful count on. And we're not staying silent anymore.